The light in the restaurant was blinding. It bounced off the polished silverware and the crystal champagne flutes, turning the entire room into a painful, glittering haze. My mother's diamonds flashed as she waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, honestly, Clara," she said. Her voice wasn't a whisper. It was a declaration, loud enough for the couple at the next table to stop their conversation and glance over. "Let's be real." I felt their eyes on me. I didn't look up. My brother David just smirked into his mimosa, a picture of casual cruelty. His fiancée, Amelia, suddenly found a water stain on the white linen tablecloth intensely fascinating. She wouldn't meet my gaze. Her shame was almost as loud as my mother's voice. I just kept stirring my coffee, round and round and round. The little silver spoon made a soft, rhythmic clink against the thick porcelain of the cup. It was the only sound I was making, a tiny anchor in a sea of humiliation. My mother leaned forward then, the scent of her expensive perfume washing over me. Her voice dropped into a conspiratorial hiss, a poison meant only for me, even though the whole world could see it being delivered. "You're only here because we felt sorry for you." My hand didn't stop stirring. Clink, clink, clink. "David needed a witness for his prenup signing," she continued, a cruel little smile playing on her lips. "And we thought, who better than the family charity case?" David let out a low chuckle. It was an ugly, satisfied sound. "She's good with paperwork, Mom. You have to give her that paperwork." My entire life, my career in corporate compliance, reduced to a boring chore. I spent my days reading the fine print that ambitious men like my brother skipped right over. I was the one who checked the foundations while he posed for pictures at the ribbon-cutting ceremony. They didn't see my skill. They saw a quiet, sad little hobby. I finally stopped stirring. The silence felt heavy. I lifted the cup to my lips and took a slow sip of the now lukewarm coffee. I could feel their impatience, waiting for the tears, waiting for me to break. I placed the cup back on its saucer without a sound. "You're right," I said, my voice perfectly level. It didn't tremble. It didn't crack. "I'm very good with paperwork." The response confused them. My mother just blinked, her attack fizzling out. She waved her hand again, already bored. "Well, now Amelia, about the caterers. I have a list." And just like that, I was invisible again. I watched them. I watched them plan a lavish future, a life built on assets I managed in, a home I silently maintained, all funded by a trust I alone administered. They saw me as a footnote in the story of their lives, a background character, a ghost at their table. They had no idea I was the one holding the pen. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my desk in the dark, the pale blue glow of my monitor lighting up my face. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, then typed. I opened a single file, one tucked away in a dozen encrypted folders. The file name glowed in the darkness: Family Trust, Execution Clause 7 billions. After the brunch from hell, I locked myself in my room. My mind kept replaying 2 moments, over and over, like a film stuck on a loop. The first was 5 years ago in my father's study. The scent of old books and his cologne hung in the air. He handed me a heavy leather folder, the corners scuffed from years of use. His hands were just beginning to tremble then. A small tremor he tried to hide. "You're the only one who reads the fine print, Clara," he'd said, his eyes locking onto mine. They were full of a desperate, terrifying clarity. "Your mother and David, they only see the finish line. You see the cracks in the road. Keep this safe for me. For when I can't." The weight of that folder felt like the weight of the world. The second memory was from 3 months ago. My mother and David cornered me in the kitchen, a stack of glossy, fresh-smelling bank documents spread on the counter. "Just some account streamlining," David said, his voice dripping with impatience. He tapped a fancy pen against the marble. "Sign here, here, and here. It'll make everything faster for us." I'd looked at the papers. What exactly am I authorizing? My mother let out a long, theatrical sigh, the kind she reserved for when I was being especially difficult. "Clara, don't be dense. It's just family business. Are you with this family or not?" So I signed. I scrawled my name where they pointed, my face a mask of compliance. It didn't matter. I knew the documents they held were meaningless, permissions for day-to-day operating accounts. They were playing checkers. My father had taught me to play chess. The leather folder he gave me held the keys to the entire kingdom. A sharp ping from my laptop shattered the memory. An email. The subject line made my stomach clench. My heart hammered against my ribs as I read it. It was from the homeowners association for the small condo I was secretly in escrow for. My escape plan. My future. Final notice. Unapproved balcony structure. Fine. $15,000. Due in 72 hours or the sale is void. The words swam before my eyes. $15,000. 72 hours. The balcony was from the previous owner, a fact buried in the bylaws. My down payment, every penny I had ever saved, was non-refundable. This fine wasn't just a fine. It was a cage. It would wipe me out and trap me in this house, under their thumbs, forever. All my secret planning, all my hopes, were about to be destroyed by a single piece of paper. I stared at the screen, a cold rage washing over me. They had spent half that amount on Brunch. My movements were stiff, robotic. I knelt and slid a small, fireproof safe from under my bed. My hands were shaking as I spun the combination. I lifted the heavy lid and pulled out the worn leather folder. Inside, tucked beneath the thick trust deeds, was a document I hadn't looked at in years. It was folded in thirds, the paper crisp and official. A fully executed, notarized durable power of attorney. My father had made me his sole fiduciary. His legal and financial proxy. My mother and brother weren't just being dismissive. They weren't just being cruel. They were breaking the law. I decided to give them one last chance to do the right thing. It was a test. And I already knew they were going to fail. I found them the next morning in the grand foyer, the cavernous space making their voices echo off the cold marble. David was meticulously polishing a golf club, his back to me. My mother was adjusting her expensive cashmere shawl, admiring her own reflection in a giant gilded mirror. They were in their own perfect, selfish world. My car keys felt heavy and sharp in my hand. I kept my voice flat, professional. I didn't show them the threatening HOA letter. I didn't let a single crack of fear show on my face. I have an unexpected, time-sensitive expense, I announced to the room. I need to make a $15,000 withdrawal from the family emergency fund. David stopped wiping his driver. He turned slowly, a look of amused disbelief on his face. He laughed. What kind of emergency, Clara? Did your library card expire? My mother sighed, turning away from her reflection as if I were a smudge on the glass. Her brow was furrowed in pure annoyance. Clara, that fund is for real family crises, like the new landscaping we need for the Hampton property. Don't be so selfish. The word hung in the air between us. Selfish. It's not selfish, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. It's a legitimate and urgent need. Her face hardened. She took a step toward me, her shadow falling over me. You are living in this house rent-free with a car we pay for, she snapped, her voice like cracking ice. Your entire life is one big subsidy from us. The last thing you are is entitled to that money. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. How ungrateful can you possibly be? Ungrateful. There it was again. This was the moment. The old Clara would have started to argue. She would have pleaded, tried to justify herself, explain the details until her voice was raw. She would have let them see the desperation clawing at her insides. But the old Clara was gone. The new Clara simply nodded once. Okay, I said. The silence that followed was deafening. I looked from my mother's furious, confused face to my brother's mocking smirk. I let the quiet stretch, watching the victory drain from their eyes and be replaced by a flicker of unease. They were expecting a fight. I gave them nothing but calm, unsettling acceptance. I understand, I said softly. I'll handle it myself. I turned and walked toward the garage. My footsteps echoed, sharp and clear, on the marble floor. The silence I left behind was heavier and more suffocating than any argument I could have made. They had no idea what to do with my quiet compliance. Once inside my car, I locked the doors and gripped the steering wheel. My hands were shaking, a fine, furious tremor. But I wasn't reaching for a tissue. I was reaching for my phone. My thumb scrolled through my contacts, past all the family members who would never have my back. I stopped on a name I hadn't called in years. Arthur Abernathy. My father's lawyer. My father's friend. I pressed the call button and held the phone to my ear, my heart hammering. He answered on the second ring, his voice calm and familiar. Arthur Abernathy speaking. I took a shaky breath. Mr. Abernathy, I said, my voice finding its strength again. It's Clara. I have a question about my father's estate. I paused, letting the weight of my next words settle. And specifically, about fiduciary duties. There was a pause on the other end of the line, a beat of charged silence. Then his voice came back, low and serious. Clara. I've been waiting for this call. My mother didn't scream or shout. She was much smarter than that. Her attack came that evening, silent and digital. It wasn't a text message or a phone call. It was worse. An email landed in my inbox. My mother, a master of passive aggression, had sent a long, rambling sob story to the entire family mailing list. Aunts, uncles, cousins, second cousins, everyone. The subject line was a work of art. A little family matter and a prayer for Clara. I felt my blood run cold as I read it. The email painted a masterpiece of maternal martyrdom. It spoke of her deep disappointment and concern for my recent behavior. It twisted my quiet independence into being secretive and demanding. My desperate need for the condo funds was warped into an attempt to extort money for a mysterious and frivolous expense. The final paragraph was the kill shot. It was a plea for everyone to reach out to Clara in her time of confusion and help her find her way back to the gratitude a daughter should have. It wasn't an email. It was a public execution. And right on cue, my phone began to buzz. Then it buzzed again. And again. It vibrated on my nightstand like an angry, trapped hornet. I picked it up. A wall of notifications. Aunt Carol, honey, your mother is worried sick. What is going on? You need to apologize to her immediately. Uncle Mark, Clara, we don't air our dirty laundry. Whatever this is, you fix it with your mother. Family is everything, you know that. My cousin Sarah, is this about money? You should know better than to upset your mom like that. It's not a good look. On and on they came, a tidal wave of judgment. They saw a story spun by a narcissist and they accepted it as gospel. Not a single person asked for my side. Not one. In their eyes, I was already guilty. I was the difficult, ungrateful daughter who needed to be brought back in line. I sat on the edge of my bed in my room, a room that now felt like a prison cell. The phone kept buzzing in my hand. I looked over at my nightstand, at the small, framed photo of the condo I was trying to buy. It wasn't just a place to live. It was a declaration of independence. It was a future they couldn't touch, and they were trying to burn it to the ground. A strange, cold calm settled over me. This was what they thought of me. This was all I would ever be to them. I opened my contacts list. Aunt Carol. Block. Uncle Mark. Block. Cousin Sarah. Block. One by one, I built a digital wall, severing the ties that were already strangling me. Just as I finished, a single text came through from a number I'd forgotten to block. My brother, David. His message was short, smug, and dripping with triumph. See? You can't win. The whole family is on our side. Just say you're sorry and we can all move on. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I stared at his words on the screen. He thought he had won. He thought this was over. I didn't reply. I just took a screenshot of the text message. Then I opened my email, attached the image, and sent it to Arthur Abernathy. My subject line was only one word. Proof. The family group chat was a wildfire of lies. But I was no longer fighting fire with fire. I was about to cause a flood. Arthur Abernathy didn't meet me in some stuffy corporate office. He chose the quietest, most secluded corner of the city's main law library. The air smelled of old paper and binding glue. It was a place of rules, of consequences. He spread the power of attorney my father had signed across the heavy oak table, his old veined hand smoothing the creases. His expression was grim. He knew, Arthur said, his voice a low, sad rumble. Your father saw their recklessness years ago. He told me he was putting a failsafe in place. He looked up at me, his eyes sharp. A failsafe to protect the family legacy. But more than that, to protect you. Suddenly, Arthur wasn't just a lawyer. He was a living witness to my father's final wishes. He was my only ally, and that was all I needed. For the next 48 hours, I didn't sleep. I worked. Arthur guided me through the legal maze, and my professional skills in corporate compliance took over. This wasn't just looking at bank statements anymore. This was a full forensic audit of my own family. And I was the auditor. I locked myself in my room, the glow of my laptop a beacon in the dark. The numbers on the screen told a story of breathtaking greed. I found everything. A $30,000 business loan to one of David's friends that was never repaid. Constant 5-figure withdrawals from the trust, labeled household expenses. That just happened to coincide with my mother's shopping trips to Europe. I even found that the property taxes on our main house were 3 months in arrears, because the money had been secretly diverted to lease David a brand new sports car. They weren't just spending. They were systematically draining the trust, hemorrhaging my father's life's work to fund their perfect hollow lives. I printed every statement. I highlighted every fraudulent expense in bright, angry yellow. I cross-referenced every line item with the trust's original charter, a thick, leather-bound document they had clearly never bothered to read. And there it was, buried in the dense legal text. Clause 7 billions. The kill shot. The words felt like they were written in fire. In the event the trust's liquid capital falls below the designated solvency threshold, all physical properties held by the trust shall be immediately and irrevocably transferred to the sole fiduciary's name. To prevent liquidation and protect the integrity of the estate, my father, the brilliant engineer, he had built one last perfect machine. And he had just handed me the key. The day before I planned to make my move, my work phone rang. It was my boss. The complex compliance audit I'd been leading for our biggest client was a huge success. They were offering me a promotion, senior auditor. The pay raise wasn't just good, it was life-changing. It was enough to cover the condo's mortgage and that ridiculous OA fine without ever touching a penny of the trust. It was my final piece of armor. I didn't need their money. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need anything from them ever again. That evening, I sent one single email. The recipient list was small, my mother and my brother. The subject line was simple, mandatory meeting. The body was even simpler. My office, tomorrow. 7 p.m., be there. My office wasn't the cubicle where I worked my 9 to 5. It was the formal study in the family home. My father's study. I was waiting for them in my father's study. I sat behind his large mahogany desk, the one I used to be afraid to even touch as a child. The air smelled of old leather and his quiet strength. This room had been the heart of our family. Tonight, it was a courtroom. They walked in exactly as I knew they would, not with caution, but with an arrogant swagger. They thought they had been summoned to witness my final groveling surrender. My mother sank into one of the plush leather armchairs, radiating impatience. David, my brother, didn't even bother to sit. He leaned against the side of the desk, arms crossed, a familiar smirk plastered on his face. They barely glanced at Arthur Abernathy, who sat quietly in a chair by the window, a silent, unassuming old man they had already dismissed. "All right, Clara, we're here," my mother began, her voice sharp and condescending. "Let's hear this grand apology so we can all get on with our lives." I didn't say a word. My hands rested on top of a thick, worn accordion file. My file. With a slow, deliberate movement, I opened it. The silence in the room was thick, broken only by the rustle of paper. The first reveal was small, a single bank ledger. I slid it across the polished wood of the desk until it stopped directly in front of my mother. "This is the family emergency fund," I said, my voice even and calm. "You told me it was for real family crises." I paused, letting my eyes drift from my mother to my brother. "Is David's new $8,000 watch a crisis? Is a $15,000 weekend at a Napa spa a crisis?" David scoffed, pushing himself off the desk. "It's our money, Clara. We can do what we want with it." I looked him dead in the eye. "That's where you're wrong." The second reveal came with a soft, heavy thud as I placed my father's old leather folder on the desk. From it, I pulled the power of attorney. The paper was crisp, the notary's seal a deep, embossed red. I turned it around so they could read the first line, where my father's signature was clear and strong. "According to this document, executed 6 years ago, I am the sole executor and fiduciary of the entire family trust." I looked directly at my mother. "You are a discretionary beneficiary, entitled only to what the fiduciary, me, deems appropriate." Then I turned to my brother. "And you," I said, letting the words hang in the air. "You are not mentioned at all." My mother's face, so full of color and life a moment ago, turned to a waxy, pale white. "That's "That's a fake," she stammered. "We had you sign new papers." From the corner of the room, Arthur's voice was calm and firm, cutting through her denial. "It is not a fake. I was the witnessing signatory." He looked at my mother, his eyes full of a quiet disappointment. "The papers you had her sign were for minor, day-to-day accounts, a clever illusion of control. Your late husband was a very thorough man." And then came the avalanche. My voice dropped, losing all its warmth, becoming as cold and hard as the marble in the foyer. "For the past 48 hours, per my legal authority as fiduciary, I have been conducting a full and complete forensic audit of the trust you have been mismanaging." I held their panicked gazes. "As of last night, all family accounts have been frozen." David lunged forward, his face turning a blotchy red. "You can't do that." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. "I can, and I have." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of their world ending. I let them hang in it for a moment, before I delivered the final blow. "Your reckless spending has pushed the trust's liquid assets below the solvency threshold outlined in Clause 7 billions of the Charter." I reached into my file and pulled out the last document. A freshly printed property deed, which triggers an automatic asset protection clause. "This house, and all physical properties attached to the trust, have been legally transferred into my name to prevent their liquidation and protect the integrity of the estate." I held up the deed. My name was at the top, printed in clear, black, undeniable ink. "This is my house now." I looked at their shattered faces. "You have 30 days to vacate." David started screaming then, a torrent of useless, impotent rage. My mother just stared, her mouth opening and closing silently, like a fish gasping for air. I didn't wait for more. I stood up, picked up my briefcase, and walked around the desk. I walked past my screaming brother and my catatonic mother. I didn't look back. I opened the study door, stepped out into the hall, and closed it gently, behind me, leaving them to drown in the ruin of their own making. After the storm, there was silence. A week later, I was sitting on the hardwood floor of my new condo, surrounded by a sea of cardboard boxes. The air didn't smell like old secrets and resentment. It smelled like fresh paint and possibility. Through the huge floor-to-ceiling window, the city lights twinkled below like a fallen constellation. My city, my view. The HOA fine was paid. The mortgage was signed. My promotion at work was official. The chaos of the past week, the screaming, the accusations, all of it felt a million miles away. I knew from Arthur that my mother and brother were staying with my Aunt Carol. Their world shrunk to a guest bedroom. They had apparently tried to hire a lawyer, who took one look at my father's trust and told them it was ironclad. There was nothing they could do. The machine my father built had worked perfectly. There was a knock on the door. It was Arthur, holding a bottle of wine in one hand and a small, neatly wrapped gift in the other. He smiled, a genuine, warm smile. He unwrapped the gift to reveal a framed photo of me and my dad at my college graduation. I was beaming, my diploma in hand. He was looking at me, not at the camera, with an expression of pure, unshakable pride. My chest tightened. "He would be so proud of you, Clara," Arthur said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "You didn't just save the money, you honored his legacy. You honored him." We ate pepperoni pizza straight from the box and drank expensive wine from cheap, mismatched glasses I'd bought that afternoon. And for the first time in a very, very long time, I felt like I was home. As we were talking, my phone, which I'd left on the kitchen counter, began to buzz. The screen lit up with a name I no longer wanted to see, David. It buzzed again, and again, a frantic, desperate rhythm. He was losing control. I calmly stood up, walked over to the counter, and picked up the phone. I looked at his name on the screen. Then I pressed the silent switch on the side. I placed it face down. The buzzing stopped. The silence was beautiful. I looked at the photo of my dad, his proud smile frozen in time. Then I looked back out at the endless city lights, at the future stretching out before me. I was the one who always read the fine print. And now, I was the one writing the next chapter. And I let them ring. Sometimes the person who seems the weakest is just the person who has been paying the most attention. If you've ever had to draw a line in the sand and fight for your own peace, share your story below. You'd be surprised how many of us have been there.